Hi, my name is Elizabeth Hill, and my presentation is on facial recognition technology. For this presentation, we're going to cover how facial recognition technology works, a brief history, how and where it's being used, privacy concerns, ethical issues, and current laws and regulations, or lack thereof. So what is facial recognition? A facial recognition system is a type of biometrics that matches a person's face from a photo, video, or in real time against a database of faces. And facial recognition systems can be used for identification or authentication purposes. So facial authentication is permission-based. It asks the question, is this person who they say they are? So it's a one-to-one comparison. An example of that would be Apple's Face ID, whereas facial identification is trying to identify a person. So the question is, who is this person? Consent is not required, and it's a one-to-many comparison on a database. An example of that would be Facebook's auto tag. A good way to differentiate it is facial authentication verifies a person identity, while facial identification often exposes it. So how does facial recognition work? So the face detection process is the process of finding a face in an image or video. Face detection only focuses on finding a face, not the identity behind it. The detection phase of facial recognition starts with an algorithm that learns what a face is. Usually the creator of the algorithm does this by training it with photos of faces. This next part is the analysis. So that also begins with an algorithm that maps the face, often by measuring the distance between the eyes, the shape of the chin, the distance between the nose and mouth, and then converts that into a string of numbers or points, often called a face print. And then the last part is the face print is then compared against a database until a match is found. So a brief history. Facial recognition finds its roots in the 1960s when a man named Woodrow Wilson Bledsoe created the first manual measurements using electromagnetic pulses on something called a RAND tablet. This was later built upon by researchers Goldstein, Harman, and Lesk, who established 21 points of facial measurement. And then in 1988, Kirby began applying linear algebra to the problem of facial recognition. And then in 1991, Turk and Pentland invented the first crude automatic face detection from images. And that's really where facial recognition got its roots, but it wouldn't be years later till technology caught up. In 1993, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, DARPA, creates the first basic database of facial images. In 2001, Tampa used the technology to scan faces of people at the Super Bowl, comparing them with images in a database of digital mugshots. This did not go over well and was very controversial at the time. It also was not very successful in identifying individuals. In 2004, the National Institute of Standards and Technology creates the face recognition vendors test, and this was done to help promote the commercial use of facial recognition systems as well as their development. And in 2009, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office creates forensic database, which allows officers to access DMV photo archives. In 2010, Facebook creates image identity auto tagging using face recognition. And in 2011, Panama Airport installs the first face recognition surveillance system. In 2014, law enforcement agencies adopt mobile face recognition using the Face First platform. iPhone becomes the world's top-selling phone with facial recognition in 2017, and in 2018, Face First achieves 150,000 facial points of measurement, including the ability to determine identity from 90-degree profile images. This is a big jump from the 1970s, where they only had 21 measurements. Then between 2014 and 2018, facial recognition software became 20 times better at searching databases to find a matching photograph. And it's only gotten better since. How facial recognition systems are being used today. One way is in retail stores. For security purposes, individuals are run against a database of known shoplifters, and they're flagged if the match is found. They're also used for customer service and loyalty programs to identify VIP customers, as well as learning what they're buying and their shopping habits. It can also be used for fraud prevention or employee tracking. Instead of using time cards, it can be used for attendance. So the ACLU sent out a questionnaire to the largest retail stores in the country asking them if they used facial recognition in their stores. And out of the companies that they sent the question out here to, only one responded back, which was Lowe's, and they said yes, they did, while the other ones refused to answer. Target claimed proprietary information. All of these stores have cameras in their stores, and it's not a far leap to say that they could have facial recognition systems. It's also a pretty simple answer. You're either using it or you're not. So I found that very interesting. So law enforcement uses. 1 in 4 police departments across the US can access facial recognition according to the Center on Privacy and Technology at Georgetown Law. And these are some of the things that law enforcement agencies say that they're using facial recognition for. One is for individuals of interest who are actively avoiding identification can potentially be located at a checkpoint. Facial recognition can be used to help confirm a witness, victim, or a perpetrator was at a specific crime scene or associates with a specific suspect or group. Facial recognition can be used to acquire images and potentially help identify existing or new subjects of investigations or assist in exoneration of suspects. It can also be used to find lost children or missing adults could be located and identified. It's also being used in our airlines and airports right now. By 2023, 97% of airports will roll out facial recognition technology. And since adopting facial recognition, Customs and Borders Control have used it on over 2 million passengers on over 15,000 flights. Facial recognition technology is currently at 18 airports across the United States, and by 2021, facial recognition will be used in the top 20 U.S. airports for 100% of international passengers, including American citizens. And on the right, you can see Delta's new check-in kiosk, and one of the options is now facial recognition instead of using a boarding pass. So a couple more uses. Schools are using it to identify suspicious individuals with the intent of preventing school shootings. This is not considered to be very effective, and so instead they're now focusing on technology, which is identifying weapons like guns and knives instead of individual faces. It's also used at events like concerts and sports. It's used on cruise ships to identify passengers getting on and off. Fast food restaurants are using it. One KFC in China uses it to order 4 individuals. They can also pay using their face. Banks are using it for more secure forms of payment. So is Big Brother watching you? This video talks about how the government is using facial recognition right now and how you probably are in a database.
Now, this may sound futuristic and sci-fi, but the governments are using facial recognition right now. In some U.S. airports, border agents are scanning the faces of foreign visitors and matching those scans to their visa applications. It could be a more secure way to track when people enter and leave the country. The government is also partnering with some airlines to use facial recognition instead of boarding passes. For U.S. citizens, the facial scans are checked against photos stored in police databases. Now, you may be thinking, I've never committed a crime. My face isn't going to be in a police database. Well, police and the FBI have scanned millions of faces using driver's licenses and passport photos. A recent report out of Georgetown University reveals that if you're an adult in the U.S., there's a 50-50 chance that your photo is stored in a massive face recognition database that law enforcement can access anytime it wants for pretty much any reason.
So I found that interesting that states were using driver's license to identify individuals. These 13 cities have banned facial recognition, with San Francisco being the first major city to do so, which I found interesting being that they're in the heart of Silicon Valley. And along with that, Amazon has recently enacted a 1-year suspension on police use of its facial recognition technology and called for Congress to enact appropriate rules during that period. Microsoft said they will not be selling any of its products to law enforcement until there are safeguards in place and regulations on it, where IBM has pulled out of the facial recognition business completely, calling for a national dialogue on whether and how facial recognition technology should be employed by domestic law enforcement agencies. Well, this is a great first step. There are still many other companies that are selling facial recognition technology to law enforcement today. And without regulation, like it stated in the video, they can use it for any reason that they want, whenever. One of those is Clearview AI, and they've been in the news recently for scraping over 3 billion photos from social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, and other sources on the internet. And the really creepy aspect of that is your account, if it was ever public, like a social media account was ever public, you turned it private or even deleted images, it can still, their technology can still access those photos and put it in a database. So some ethical issues. Anonymity and free speech. So during the protests surrounding the death of Freddie Gray in 2015, Baltimore police ran social media photos against a face recognition database to identify protesters and arrest them. This is very concerning, and it's happened with protests this summer with Black Lives Matter. And with no regulations on how it can be used, it's not a far stretch to say that it could be endangering free speech. Facial recognition systems are also not created equally. Depending on the algorithm, some of them can be extremely biased. A National Institute of Science and Technology study found that facial recognition systems misidentify Black women at disproportionately high rates. They also are not very good at identifying ethnic minorities or women. And also, facial recognition without laws or regulations could create a mass surveillance state. And that's happening in China right now, which is why I think it's really important that laws and regulations are in place, because this technology is just getting better and better. So these are a list of a couple of the most recent legislation and laws and bans. Right now, there's no federal regulation on it, although there is a bill in Congress that would require a warrant before law enforcement was able to use use recognition surveillance for more than 3 days. And Massachusetts is actually right now looking to become the first state to outright ban facial recognition technology. So here are a couple of resources you can use, and these will be linked below the video. So Who Has Your Face is a quiz you can take, and it helps you identify what government agencies may have your photo. The second one is Image Cloaking for Personal Privacy. I've not used it, but it's a free download, and it was developed by the University of Chicago, where it slightly alters your photo. So companies like Clearview AI can't get a clear match on it. And then the third one is Fight for the Future Map, and that shows you how and where the government is applying facial recognition. So it shows where bans are in place, it shows what airports are using it, what states are using it, and how they're using it, and what databases it's a part of. So I'm going to end it on this video, which talks a little bit about more uses of facial recognition and also ends on some really great questions. And it talks about China's use of facial recognition.
In China, the government takes facial recognition to the next level. To curb jaywalking, which apparently is a big problem in the country, the Chinese government has resorted to public shaming. Jaywalkers get their photos snapped by government-owned cameras, and then 20 minutes later, their picture is up on a giant screen with their ID number and home address. Again, yikes. Now, facial recognition is not just about safety and tracking down criminals. It's also about making money. When you and your friends are auto-tagged when you upload a photo to Google or Facebook, that's one more data point that companies can use to track what you do online, what you like, and what you buy. But that's the cost of free technology. It's right there in the terms of service that none of us ever read. We use a super useful tool at no cost. The tech companies mine every photo, status update, tweet for info that online advertisers are willing to pay big money for. Facebook and Google alone are predicted to make $106 billion from advertising this year. That's nearly half of all the money made from digital advertising in the world. Big box retailers are getting into the game too. Walmart has filed a patent for facial recognition technology that can identify when shoppers are unhappy or frustrated, which the company says will allow it to provide better customer service. But that same data can also be used to track purchases and predict what items you might buy in the future. So now we'd like to hear from you. Where would you draw the line? In what situation would you be comfortable allowing facial recognition? Whenever? Law enforcement only? Just private companies? Or pretty much never?